Hello, guys, and welcome back to All for United. I'm Ben. We're live on YouTube, and today we've got a very special guest, Kieran Maguire. We've had him on the channel before because Kieran speaks expertly about how professional football clubs operate as a business and explains and helps people understand the finance of professional football clubs and financial implications that the owners have on their burden as well. He's got a great book out, The Price of Football. He's got a fantastic podcast as well. So we're going to be talking about the Glazers and their ownership of Manchester United to help better inform people out there to what they're protesting for and the reasons behind it. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the finances of Manchester United Football Club after this. Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from passionate Reds, only on All for United. Kieran Maguire from The Price of Football joins me. Kieran, thank you for coming on again, mate. How are you?
I'm all good, Ben. Suffering a nosebleed as a Brighton fan from being in the top half of the table, and I'll enjoy it whilst it lasts. It won't last for long, I'm sure.
Altitude sickness is a pain in the arse, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a tough one to take. Look, Kieran, for anyone out there who's wondering a bit more about your work and what you do, please could you just, in a minute or so, just sort of explain what you do and your love for it?
Well, I'm a teacher. I teach at the University of Liverpool, and I've managed to persuade them that teaching football finance is a proper subject. They've backed me, so I teach on a football MBA course. We teach people from the industry. I work for the LMA for managers and people involved in the game, just trying to give them an insight into how the numbers work and impact upon them. And I do a podcast with comedian and writer Kevin Day, where we're just two old blokes moaning about the state of the game not from a football angle, but from a business angle. Why did we end up with the likes of Bury and Macclesfield going bust? Why are Derby administration? Why are Manchester United not delivering, considering the size of the club and things like that?
So in terms of that, how is Manchester United different? Because Manchester United, obviously, we've got an ownership. It's a very turmoil ownership and relationship between fan and owners. But in terms of how the club operates, we're on a stock exchange. We also, as a business, our infrastructure seems maybe slightly outdated from the outside. But just simply from you, is there a certain way that Manchester United operates differently to, let's say, an Aston Villa or let's say a Leeds or a Celtic or a Rangers? Is there any complications within that for you?
Yes, I mean, I think on a sort of a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of how much focus is there at a club on making money, I would say at Manchester United, we're at 9 or 10 because the Glazers are driven by profitability. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because in all other lines of business, the main focus is of making sure that you deliver for shareholders. As you rightly said, Ben, that Manchester United are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and therefore they're getting pressure from other shareholders as well to make money for the business. And if you contrast that to Aston Villa, Aston Villa have got the third highest losses in the history of the Premier League. In Wes Edens and Naz Sawiris, they've got two owners who want to have a bit of fun with their money, and that's what we might refer to as a trophy asset, whereby the aim of the owners is to treat it not as necessarily an indulgence, but as something which they can enjoy. And I think it goes to the full extreme when you look at both Chelsea and Manchester City, who both have owners where so long as they're within the financial fair play rules, that's the only financial restraint they have. They're willing to buy whatever the manager wants. They're willing to commit to wage levels and losses that you wouldn't see in another line of business. But if you're dealing with ultra wealthy billionaires, and we're not even talking about your regular billionaires, might be a bit more squeaky bum time. Both Abramovich and Mansour have lost around about £750 million since acquiring their respective clubs, but they can easily absorb that. So Manchester United is a classic listed company whereby the objectives are to make a return, a financial return, and if it delivers trophies as well, that's fantastic, but that's of secondary interest. And in a game such as football, which is so competitive, it does mean that it's a bit of a it does act as a bit of an anchor in terms of where the club can go. I mean, you mentioned that the infrastructure at Manchester United is looking a bit tatty. Well, that's because Glazers don't want to go and pay for it. They were hoping that Project Big Picture and Super League were going to pay for it, and they've been involved in those for quite a few years. Neither of those are around at present in their present form, but I suspect they'll both come back.
So without focusing specifically on Manchester United and just bouncing off a point that you just made there, I think, within what you've just said, do you think many people out there, football fans, maybe we love football, for the romance of the beautiful game, do you think people forget nowadays that ultimately, like any investment, any Tom, Dick and Harry would make in anything, the end goal is always profitability? And do you think that maybe some football fans forget when they look at the finances of football clubs that ultimately owners, of course, are going to make decisions based upon the best opportunity to be able to get, you know, a comeback from the original investment made in the club?
Yeah, because we don't fall in love with football for that reason. You know, when I went to my first match I went to a match at 7 or 8 with an uncle, and it was the the floodlights being so bright and the grass being so green and the smell of the hot dogs and the emotion that brick football brings. And it isn't, we have an emotional investment as fans. Some owners don't. Some owners do. And remember, I think the Glazers and also FSG at Liverpool, to an extent, I think Stan Kroenke at Arsenal, they really are profit focused in making a financial return, and that is on a scale. I think we have to look at things. Different clubs have got different approaches in terms of profitability versus sporting success. Everybody wants sporting success, but sometimes because it's a talent industry, it comes at a financial price. Manchester United normally pay the highest wages or the second highest wages in the Premier League, so that you could argue that they back the manager. The Glazers have had they will say, well, we've had a highest net spend on players over the course of the last 5 years. So, that they will say that we are backing the managers, we are backing what's happening on the pitch, but it's not materialised. Now, I'm not a football coach. I don't have that football insight. I can't really say, why they failed to deliver. The money has been spent. I don't think it's been spent necessarily as well as fans would have liked, but that's why they employ professionals to do that type of thing.
I think the big question for United fans, and we're going to get into this, is how much of actual money have the Glazers personally invested in the football club? It's one thing pressing a button on the revenue and going, look, let's reinvest from the revenue back into the club. And obviously a lot keeps being made of their dividends, of the debt, and all these different things. So I think the question is always, and for me, look, they've owned this club for long enough, I think, to have already, or should have already, made their shrewd investments to make the business profitable. I think the issue of where we're at now is that they haven't actually done that. They haven't done that. But we need that now more than ever. So I think the Glazers, in some ways, as if we just look at them as business owners and not people who own our football clubs, I think they've made bad decisions to get to where they are now. And I think ultimately that's what's biting them in the backside now. But now is a time that really United need more investment on the infrastructure. They need more investment and need more leadership within the building. But there's a factor here that, and a, so to speak, a common demeanor within the fan base that thinks that has to come from Joel Glazer or that has to come from one of the Glazers. Well, really, there should be people within Manchester United who are high up within the business that ultimately then go to the board of investors and are able to pitch to get what we need to do to complete that infrastructure. So the blame can't be totally on the Glazers for that. But we'll come back into that in a little bit more detail, Kieran, because I want to provide some context on this. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you quite an open question. Now, if anyone follows Kieran, you'll get so much information about things that you 5 years ago would never have been able to see. And that's thanks to Kieran's amazing graphs, the context that he puts up when it comes to Newcastle being taken over, Aston Villa and their finances, and Rangers recently as well. You put a graph up and I saw that. But out of all the clubs in world football that you've analysed of recent and you've looked at, which would you say have got it right? Which would you say have got their structure together? Which are you most impressed with? Is there a club name that comes straight to mind that when I say that isn't Brighton and Hove Albion?
Well, no. Yeah, we're at Brighton. We've got an owner that's stuck in 400 million quid. So from a business point of view, yeah, that's not a good model to use. As much as people might be scratching their heads, I would say, as far as the Premier League are concerned, the two best run clubs from a financial perspective are Burnley, because their owners have never put a penny in. But the owners before ALK Capital came in a year ago, that they didn't put money into the club. The new owners haven't put much money into the club, and yet they're still in the Premier League. And Spurs, for Daniel Levy is a very smart operator. What he's managed to do is to get Spurs from generating probably the sixth or the seventh highest match day revenues in the Premier League. In a full season, I would now expect Spurs to be top of the table, and nobody historically has come near Manchester United in terms of utilising the stadium. Spurs have the lowest wages as a proportion of revenue of any club in the Premier League, and they do that season in, season out. So as a business, I think they are very, very successful. My next door neighbour is a Spurs fan, and he says, well, okay, yeah, but look at our trophy cabinet. And I say, yeah, that's the problem. Now, but do you expect Spurs to win trophies? Yeah, I grew up. I've been watching football from 1969, 70 was my first season, and you always saw Spurs as an occasional cup winning club, and that was about as far as it went. And they're not even achieving that. They've won nothing since 2008. So that's the danger. If you go down that particular route, if you run the football club smartly as a business, you deliver profits on a regular basis, and you stay within the Premier League, and they would say, well, we regularly have qualified for Europe, and that brings in the money. Is that enough to keep the fans happy? And that's that disconnect. And we see at Spurs there's a lot of unhappiness with Daniel Levy. We've seen that at Newcastle. We've seen that at United. When was the last time you saw a Chelsea or a Manchester City fan moan about their owners? Because their owners just say, here's a blank check, go and have fun with it.
Mm-hmm. Is that the way to run a business, though, for you, Kieran? Does the on-field success make up for that in some business terms you would call slightly recklessness? But then again, also, as a football club, you need to be successful on the pitch to be successful off it, right?
Yes, but it depends how you measure success. Arsene Wenger, famously used to say, finishing fourth in the Premier League is success. And the fans were saying, well, actually, we think we want a bit more than that. And so how exactly do you gauge success? Because from a global point of view, Arsenal are not as big as Manchester United or Liverpool, or I'd probably say not even as big as Chelsea these days. So therefore, if they can finish fourth on the basis that they don't have that global presence, was that actually a fair achievement and a reasonable comment from Wenger himself? He, as a business analyst, I absolutely understand where he's coming from. As a Brighton fan, if we finish 12th in the Premier League, that's a fantastic achievement. We don't win anything, but it helps the club from a business point of view. So it's really what do fans feel is realistic, and I think Manchester United, being the club that it is, having the dominance that it's had until Sir Alex retired, I think Manchester United fans have come to expect more from the ability to bring trophies to the club than has been delivered in the post Sir Alex and also the post David Gill era as well.
And it's also like, again, this isn't really a question, but I also don't know if maybe the Glazer could go and take £400 million out of their own money, right, and put it into the club and put that into a new manager and 4 transfers. Now, maybe 3 transfers if you're lucky, right, with the inflated transfer market and where's that's at. But even if they did that, it doesn't guarantee success anymore. Like, it doesn't guarantee that you are going to finish, as Wenger said, in the top 4 and that being a success. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to win the league. It seems to be sustained progression and having a project in mind that you can faithfully continue with and you continue to invest in. That is what's bringing success to clubs now. For instance, Liverpool, Jurgen Klopp and the journey he's gone on. He's had bumps in the road with FSG, etc., but they believed in the project and that continued. Pep Guardiola was always going to be the man for that job. Always going to be the man for that job. And I think that's why when even you look at Newcastle now, and I turned around and said this when they were first taken over, great, you've got new owners. That's not going to save you from relegation this season if this team continues like it is. It's going to make no difference whatsoever. So I think ultimately maybe, I don't know, Kieran, maybe there's a misconception that the amount that an owner invests in a football club will guarantee a certain amount of success. The pivot to that, I suppose, would be Burnley, right?
Yes, entirely. But Burnley have got a very modest budget. But if you think about that, we just spoken about Manchester City, we've spoken about Liverpool, we just mentioned Burnley. Mm-hmm. The 3 things that those clubs have in common is they all have a style. Mm-hmm. You know exactly. And the thing about Manchester City is I don't know which 11 players are going to start each week, mm-hmm. but I know exactly how they're going to play, and they are interchangeable, and all of the players know what's expected of them, and the players are recruited purely to improve what happens on the field of play. Mm-hmm. Could you say the same about Manchester United with regard to, because some people are signed because they will boost things off the field, and we know what type of players, Pogba, Ronaldo, and so on. That they were signed for big money, big fanfare, it's odd to have a football club recruit players, which effectively means that the manager now has to change his strategy, and all of the players have to fit around them, that's unusual.
This isn't me being Glazer in or like trying to argue for the Glazers either, though, Kieran. But as me and you both know, also that decision isn't solely down to the Glazers, is it?
No, I mean ultimately, Joel Glazer is the person at within the family who tends to have the closest relationship with the club. The recruiting staff will pitch to him, and if I'm honest, they since Sir Alex retired, I've got the numbers here. Manchester United have spent £1.3 billion since 2013 on signing players, and you've got to ask, well, either the people choosing the players have made the errors, or the players themselves have, perhaps that they should be more concerned about, why have they failed to deliver the return in terms of trophies that you would expect for such a huge investment. So the money has been spent. It's come from the commercial deals. It's Manchester United have famously borrowed an awful lot of money as well. The banks are more than happy to lend to Manchester United because they see it as a well-run business.
I think this is where your expertise comes in incredibly, and that's this graph that you shared with us. First of all, would you mind explaining this graph to us in terms of what it means? But would you be able to start, please, with explaining what each line is and what the meaning is behind each line? And I don't know if you want to summarize now or at the end. Where does that money come from?
Right. I mean, first of all, I didn't head it up quite correctly. I should. People say, well, some of this money that has been spent has been given to the Glazers, or it's their own private money. But I've got 3 things here. I've looked first of all. If we take the very top figure, it's how the investors and there's two types of providers of finance for a business. There's shareholders and there's banks, and they get a reward, and they get a reward in two forms. First of all, three forms. First of all, banks receive interest, and the banks under the Glazers have earned over £800 million in interest. Where now people were saying, well, is that good? Because Manchester United had no debt when the Glazers took over. That £800 million, if you stuck half of that in the transfer kitty and half of that on Old Trafford, you've got the best ground in the country. Because the state of Old Trafford, I think it is a cause for concern. I'm going there in a few weeks as an away fan, and you look at it and say, well, it's all sort of all fur coat and no knickers. In terms of you do have an expectation as a fan in what you would consider to be a modern stadium, and I'm 6'3". I can't sit down at Old Trafford. Not that I want to, because I'm as an away fan, you don't want, but I can't physically sit down because the seats are so close together. This first figure, the top line, shows that between them, the banks, in terms of the interest they've received, the shareholders in terms of the dividends they receive, which is around about £22 million a year, and shareholders invest and they expect to receive dividends. And then finally, what we have seen on a few occasions is that the Glazer family have sold shares. So I'm looking at the rewards for the providers of finance. And that comes to about 1.4 billion.
Just to confirm, so is that money out or money in?
Well, no, most of that is money out, in the form of dividends and interest on the loans. The money that Glazers make from share sales, it's not out of Manchester United. It's just pure profits. So it's the Glazers making money. So we're seeing, well, what are the rewards for the key investors in Manchester United? And it's been the banks and the Glazers. They will say, we're investors, we take the risk. What's the problem? The second figure is it's the net transfer spend, and again, it sort of reiterates what I was just saying to you a little bit earlier. In the early years of the Glazer ownership, Sir Alex had to operate to a really tight budget. So as you can see, between 2005, when the Glazers acquired the club, and 2013, when Sir Alex retired, a net spend of 170 million is, I think it's a testament to his ability to A, spot a bargain, and B, the legacy of the academy scheme, which allowed Manchester United to develop talent from within. And since then, a series of managers, Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, and now Solskjaer, they have been given an awful lot of money to spend. Mm-hmm. They've spent over £1 billion on a net basis over the years. And the final figure, and the one which has not moved particularly, is the infrastructure spend. So if fans are wondering, it's the toilets are looking a bit shabby. We've got apocryphal tales of football journalists going to Old Trafford and their laptops are getting soaked because the roof's leaking and so on. It's because the Glazers don't tend to spend a penny unless they have to when it comes to investment in infrastructure. And you can get away with that. And they will say, well, 150 million pounds in 15, 16 years isn't small. And they're right. But, Leicester are spending around about 100 million on a new training facility in 1 year. We've seen the amount that Spurs have spent. They spent around about 1.5 billion in terms of their, and that brings you benefits, because if you've got the most up-to-date training facilities, medical facilities, and so on, it means that the investment you put into players can be enhanced because you're getting a maximum return on them. Mm-hmm. if anybody has read the Super League proposals and the Project Big Picture proposals, both of those had pots of money which were going to be allocated to clubs instead of broadcasting revenue to allow the clubs to invest in infrastructure. So I suspect, given that the close relationship that the executives of Manchester United, and I always try to separate the executives from the fans, that they thought, well, why spend money on this type of stuff when we can pick it up at a later date from one of our crazy plans? And now I think those plans are going to be on the back burner. They're not going to disappear altogether, but they're on the back burner.
See, this is what's really difficult with these again, and this graph paints a fantastic picture. And I think then all you've got to do is go and have a Google of the revenue United take in. So even if we just look at what the last 3 years, 2017 to 2018, 2018 to 2019, 2019 to 20, United turned over some of their best ever yearly revenue numbers. I think it was something like, from what I'm reading here, 665 million euros in 2017, 711, which is the best financial year United have ever had, in 2018, and then 2019, 580. I mean, ultimately, you're looking at this and you're wondering, Kieran, where the club's making enough money to run itself, right? So United can afford to spend what these net transfer spends are, potentially maybe even a little bit more if the right infrastructure was in place. Obviously, the dividends that are going out, and obviously the underinvestment in the stadium. I suppose looking at those numbers and hearing those numbers, the Glazers shouldn't have to invest much in the club, should they? But this could be taken out of it, right?
To be fair, they've never put a penny into the club. The people that they have paid was under Malcolm Glazer was the original shareholders. They built up a stake. Was it JP McManus and his colleague. They bought those out as well. So that's where they stand. Manchester United was acquired by the Glazers via what we refer to as a leveraged buyout, and it's the equivalent of buying a house on a 90% mortgage. Mm-hmm. But previously the house had no mortgage. You effectively then sell yourself the house, and it's on a 90% mortgage. And of course, if you've got a mortgage, you've got to pay interest. When the Glazers initially acquired the club, the reaction of the lenders and the markets, they were a bit twitchy. They don't know who these guys are. They saw Manchester United as being a potentially risky investment, and that's why if the lenders see something as risky, that's reflected in the interest rates, and I think those interest rates peaked at 16.25%. Those are credit card rates on one of the world's most famous football clubs in an iconic stadium on a piece of real estate which was worth a lot of money. But the bank said, well, we either lend to you at this rate or not at all. And the Glazers said, we'll gamble with that. And that gamble from their point of view has paid off.
There was a big PR piece that came out after our last quarterly figures. I don't know if you saw it or sort of managed to look into it much, but it was around United reducing their debt despite the COVID-19 pandemic. You spoke there about the banks and the rates. I mean, United's net debt is now at 419 million. I think just above that, actually. And they managed to shave 55 million off of it year on year by the looks of it. That debt is always a concern for United fans. It always is a concern for United fans, and it's a potential worry should the club one day be sold, because it's a nice sizable debt. I was looking into some figures on Barcelona's debt, and I was wondering if you have any insight or thought around how our debt for the club we are compares to any clubs across Europe.
I think the debt was an initial concern, because if you go back to 2005-06, which was Manchester United's first season under the Glazers, they had net debt of around about, I'm just looking at my spreadsheet here, they had net debt of 600 million pounds, and they were only generating 160 million pounds a year. So when your debt is 4 times your earnings, that is squeaky bum time. What we've seen since then is the debt has broadly flatlined. It's the equivalent of an interest-only mortgage, and the revenue's gone up. Now, if we then look at Spurs have huge amounts of debt. Their debt exceeds that of Manchester United, but they will say, well, we've got a brand new shiny stadium out of it, which can be used for the NFL, can be used for concerts in London, and we're making a fortune from it. Spurs make £800,000 a match from catering sales, for example. Huge amounts, mate, far in excess of any other club. So the debt, I think, was a major cause for concern in the early years. Now it sticks around. People don't like it as fans, but from a business risk point of view, it's not actually an issue. Manchester United are borrowing at around about 3.25% from the banks. The banks wouldn't lend to you at such cheap rates unless they had confidence in the club to meet the debt obligations. And by that, what I mean is, can you pay the interest on an annual basis when it's due for payment? And Manchester United don't actually have a problem there. They do have cash in the bank. So as Manchester United have grown and the debt has broadly stayed, it dipped a little bit when the club was listed, but it's broadly been constant since then. I don't see this as a major problem. It's certainly a stick that can be used to beat the Glazers with, but they're fairly thick-skinned, and they don't perceive it as a problem, and the markets don't perceive it either.
Is again, sorry, this is a bit of a left field question, nothing to do with the Glazers, but it just came to my mind as you were speaking now off the back of what you were saying, and I don't know whether I've taken that the wrong way, so please correct me here if I'm wrong. But do you think that maybe there's a lot always said about Ed Woodward not being a football guy, being more of a financial guy, because we know his background, right? Investment banker, we know what he's done. And there's this whole thing around United being a commercial entity at the top and not a footballing entity at the top. But you talk there about the figures, and you talk there about United in terms of what we've done to stabilise that debt, to no longer, so to speak, be a problem, to get the percentages down on the interest. Would you say that that's potentially Ed Woodward's finest work at United? The fact that over the last 6 years, United's commercial value, and we joke about getting a grass sponsorship or like a seat sponsorship in the stadium because that's where it's going, but United are valued very highly as a commercial entity, and by doing so, can we now afford to look at the debt not being potentially a massive problem as compared to what it was? Is that down to Woodward's work over the past 6-7 years? Because we really have seen a projection in revenue, haven't we?
Revenue has grown. How much credit should be given to Ed Woodward, because he's not actually a commercial. You say he's a banker. He's not a football fan in his own right.
Nice ringtone. I like that.
Thank you. I'll just tell him to go away. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Very unprofessional thing.
We all get a phone call during meetings. It happens once.
That's right, but not with Killing Joke as your ringtone. and for that will only be understood by old men.
Comment in a comment if you know that. Comment in the comments.
Yes. Ed Woodward is given credit by the Glazer family because he is their eyes and ears at the club on a day-to-day basis. He is rewarded accordingly. His remuneration has regularly been in the region of £3 million a year, which is, if the Glazers are happy to spend that, that's fine. And they'll also point out that compared to first-team player wages, that's actually quite modest. And in what other businesses does the chief executive earn less money than people on the shop floor, as it were? So, the Glazers are they're happy with what Ed Woodward has done. He certainly has. He saw the potential for growth in Manchester United as a commercial organisation, and the globalisation in terms of business partners. So that deserves some credit. In terms of the markets themselves, they're a bit indifferent, and the reason why I say that is that if you take a look at the Manchester United share price, has it increased since the club was listed in 2012? Yes, it has. How has it performed compared to the rest of the New York Stock Exchange? It's pretty poor. And that's because Manchester United are not growing anymore. We've reached, we've got a constant amount of match day revenues coming in because they've not invested in the stadium, so therefore they can't charge more. And again, I think I'm trying to be as even-handed as I can be here. They could have increased season ticket prices on a regular basis. And I know that they were initially increased quite a lot by the Glazers, and that upset a lot of the fans. But over the course of the last decade, prices have remained relatively stable. I'm old enough to remember going to Old Trafford in 1980. I was at university in Manchester, and United have always been one of the cheaper stadiums to watch football in. And even though it's the prices are, for a family to attend a match, it's eye-boggling, and by the time you factor in merchandise as well, which of course the club are always thinking about, it's quite scary. But regular season ticket prices are not they're not at the top end of the Premier League figures. Match day tickets are a slightly different issue. So they can't make more money from match day. They can't make more money from broadcasting. Manchester United are desperate to break up the way that the Premier League sell the TV rights. They want to sell their own rights. But and that's why they were so keen about Super League, because under Super League, you were able to sell 3 home games worth of receipts. Now, Manchester United make, if we just take a look at the numbers, in their most recent year, they made £255 billion from broadcast income. But United claim to have over 1 billion fans in the world. So that's not a lot of money, is it? Yeah, that's 25 pence per fan per year they're making from TV.
I'm going to ask, like, Kieran, who wants to do that? Like, who want in Manchester? Who's Manchester United, and who wants that? Is it the financial or the commercial people within the club? Because obviously, hopefully, the footballing people don't have a mindset of that and don't care about that side of things. Is it the ownership? Like, who want then? I think this is what's difficult to understand for all fans. Who wants stuff like that? Who wants United on the stock exchange? Who wants a fan shares? Like, who wants these things? Who's implementing these things, and who's responsible for them?
Well, it's the board of directors and it's the owners who appoint those board of directors. So ultimately, it is the Glazer family, because they still have, in terms of votes, they've still got practically all of the votes because of the way that they've structured the company, so that the vast majority of the shares that they own carry 10 votes each. So it's all coming from the Glazers. If Manchester United have got 1 billion fans, and if they can persuade 10% of their fans, so 100 million fans, to spend, United got a big match. They got Liverpool coming up at Old Trafford. They get 10% of their fans to spend £5 on pay-per-view to watch that match. They get £500 million from a single match. Mm-hmm. Now, last year they got 250 million for the whole season. That's their holy grail. Can they persuade the Premier League to allow them to sell one match a season? Under Project Big Picture, they were planning to allow themselves to sell 8, and there was nothing to stop them from increasing that 8 in due course. In Super League, again, they could sell those rights. So when we talk about Manchester United, I should talk about Manchester United executives, the Glazer families, and once that particular Pandora's box is opened, then the value of the club increases substantially in their eyes. And they can make a lot more money as shareholders and as people being involved in the market. When both Big Picture and Super League were initially announced, we saw a spike in Manchester United's share price because investors realised there's money to be made.
Mm-hmm. I've got 2 more questions for you, Kieran. Quite semi-big ones, I suppose. The stock exchange and the Glazers, obviously being American and being in NFL as well. What impact does franchises and the stock exchange have when it comes to the running of Manchester United Football Club and the finances within?
Well, the advantage of a franchise is that you've got locked in, guaranteed revenues. So from the Glazers' point of view, wouldn't it be absolutely fantastic if they didn't have to finish in the top 4 in the Premier League in order to qualify for a European competition? If that money is locked in. So that's the concept of a franchise. You've got guaranteed revenues, and you're not in a competitive scenario, and that has. If you've got money, which is my dog's probably about to start barking, by the way.
We love dogs on live streams.
But it's okay. The postman's just come.
There we go.
I told you. I'll just wait for the postman.
Finally, that translates to Glazers out in dog language, which is the dog getting well into the show.
Yeah. Just
no worries. I think what's interesting with having a dog barking there is that ultimately I think the dog will probably be asking better questions than I am right now. So I think fair enough. He's probably asking the postman what's in those letters, which is fair enough. It's fair enough.
He's opening their dog treats. So.
Yeah.
So in terms of what do we mean by a franchise? A franchise is a business arrangement whereby the owners of the franchise agree a formula for sharing money around, and that. Whereas in the Premier League, you have to qualify. You have to be in the Premier League on a sporting merit basis. Mm-hmm. Franchise is by invitation, or you pay a franchise fee, as we see in the MLS. So that's one point. From the point of view of the stock exchange, the stock exchange investors are people with money, and they are making choices. Should I invest in Tesla? Should I invest in Apple? Should I invest in Manchester United? And the stock exchange is a facility to allow people to express where they think the most appropriate place is to invest. Manchester United shares have not performed badly since they went on to the New York Stock Exchange, but they've not been spectacular either.
Mm-hmm. And my final question around the Glazers and their handling of Manchester United is that you're a financial expert, your business etiquette is second to none. So you're looking at those figures, you're looking at United overall as a business and the way it's being owned, the way it's being managed. In terms of the trajectory of what a business should be and what determines success. So let's say success for United is on the field accomplishments, followed up by obviously being a financially stable commercial entity in its own right, so a powerhouse, not just on the field but off the field as well. What does that trajectory for you look like under the Glazers at Manchester United? Does something have to give somewhere?
Trying to get that balance, Ben, is never easy because Spurs will say Spurs are the most profitable club in the Premier League in the last decade, but they've not won a thing. Manchester City and Chelsea have made the biggest losses in the Premier League over the last decade, and those clubs they've won the Premier League 4 years out of the last 5. They competed in the Champions League final, so it's a nightmare of a business. As far as the Glazers are concerned, they will say, well, under Sir Alex, they delivered Premier League trophies. They've won the Champions League, but we're now having to look, sort of quite a long way over our shoulder for those glory years, and I think that's probably counts against them. If they had invested more money in infrastructure many years ago, I think they could be reaping a much higher return in terms of the match day income. I believe, I may be wrong on this, that they can no longer host the Champions League final because the state of the stadium is not good enough. Again, for me, I see many lost opportunities because the Manchester United board weren't prepared to invest in Old Trafford and its surrounding facilities when perhaps they could have been a little bit bolder, and that counts against them. So overall, I would say I would give Manchester United perhaps a C+ under the Glazers, mainly for the early years under Sir Alex. Certainly, since Sir Alex retired, probably a C-. They will say, well, that we're generating more money than we have ever before, and that's all that matters. We're generating profits on a regular basis. The interest amount being paid has come down. and the shareholders are getting regular dividends, which they didn't do before. So yeah, they will point to all these as positives.
I think in terms of the way United are run and us being a commercial entity, I think they've always done enough to keep us bubbling along. I even think if you look at the latter end of Sir Alex Ferguson's time, obviously in management and with us, it still wasn't great investment. Don't know where the Ronaldo transfer fee went. The investment then what we had on the coming seasons. Even Fergie's final season, there was no strategy in place. There was nothing in place. There was nothing there, and there does need to be a little bit of leadership from the owners on that point of view. But I do think also we probably give the board of directors a bit like now. Maybe we're letting the players off a little bit. They're all going for the manager. We've got to look at those board of directors as well. And yes, they're important. They're employed, and put in their position, as gratification from the owners or hire people within the club. Ultimately, decisions through a business are made in some very different areas in which sometimes the main investors don't get to the final say. They run with the consensus of the board. Of course, they will always have a say on that board, but they don't trigger it as necessarily as some people may think. If you're protesting for Glazers out, know what you're protesting for. And that is for the fact that this club should not just be a club that's powerful off the pitch. It needs to be powerful on it. And for it to be powerful on it, potentially, yes, we need to see if the grass is greener by having some heavier investment from people who are passionate about taking the football club to the next level. That is never just about on-field success as well. When was the last time you looked at a massive star doing a tour of Europe and Old Trafford was on that tour poster? And I know that doesn't mean much for football fans in the romance of football, but that goes to show the digression and the minimal amount of investment being put into what Kieran has described, the football stadium, the entity, what that club is. Kieran, as a football fan, is a Brighton and Hove Albion football fan. He's going to watch his team away to Manchester United. He should be going to that game thinking, blimey, we're just about to play the biggest club in one of the biggest clubs in Europe. This is going to be an incredible experience. He's greeted by rusty walls on the stadium and a train station, an old train station that has never been invested any money in. He can't even sit on his seat because there's no room there. There's absolutely nothing there. Whereas those over the road, constantly doing stuff in the community, that they're constantly putting on events in that stadium. They have a light show before kickoff. And although that's not for everyone, I get it. That's not for the legacy fan. Ultimately, that as a football club is how you progress within the current time. That's how you become a more sustainable entity that can allow you to go and invest more and be able to build upon your success off the pitch and on it as well. You need to be an attractive proposition to everyone involved. That's sponsorship, players, families, the local community. You've got to be something bigger than what we currently are. The training ground, underinvested completely. It's no longer there. When it was built, state of the art, it was great. Now it needs major investment to become anywhere near. I think it was who launched a new training complex the other day? Leicester. I think it was Leicester, wasn't it? Nowhere near. It's absolutely nowhere near. And that's where, under this ownership, the standards are never going to be raised. We need owners to come in to raise the standards of our football club to help us progress on and off the pitch in so many different ways. We can't keep bubbling along. So if you're protesting, that's what you're protesting for. Just remember that. There's a bigger picture to this. It's not just about on the field, because as we said at the very start, and this is where we come full circle, the Glazers can put £500 million into United in January to go and sign some players. With the current inflation in the transfer window and what United need, probably get you 3 players. Now, when has 3 players ever won a trophy by themselves? It takes a team, it takes a feeling, it takes the fans, it takes the club, it takes structure, it takes a journey to get sustained success. And that's what needs to change for me. And that's what if I'm protesting Glazers out, am protesting for. Does that make sense, Kieran? I hope it just made sense. It was a long spiel, but I wanted to round it up. That's for me what is important as a football fan and as a Manchester United fan. And that for me is why we need a change of ownership. But again, who knows if the grass is greener or not? But that's what we've got to look at for me. And that's how I feel as a fan. And do you know what? They might be communicating now with us fans, but do you know what? It's been too long. It's been too long. Having a few conversations now doesn't sum up for what? 16 years of silence? We want people involved and invested in this football club. Kieran, you've provided an incredible insight. Can you tell people, please, where they can get more from you to do with football finances and the price of football?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Kieran Maguire, KIERN MAGUIRE. And the Price of Football podcast, you can get it from all the usual places. So it's myself and Kevin Day, who's a fantastic presenter. He makes me look good, which is quite an achievement, given that I am a dweeby nerd. I'm fully aware of my obsessions, and that goes out twice a week on a Monday and Thursday, and we get guests, and we're hoping to have some people from football. I've been trying to get somebody from Manchester United for a long period of time, and I've got a good relationship with the club. They've got some very, very good people and some real Manchester United fans working at Old Trafford, and they've got some people whose main focus is on other things than what happens on the pitch.
Happens in all life of business, though, right? It happens in all life of business. Fingers crossed, though, we can just look onwards and upwards. Kieran, it's always fascinating to talk to you. Thank you. Guys, if you love this video, leave a comment. Tell us, are you Glazers out? Why are you Glazers out? If you've got any questions for Kieran, I don't know, maybe stick them in the comments and we can pass them on to him, and he can help answer your questions for you. Please get your questions and anything you want in the comments. Hit a like on this video. And until next time, we'll speak to you soon. Cheers, Kieran. Thank you, mate.
Cheers, Ben. Take care, buddy.